Alright, all I gotta do is tweet it and send it to my Discord server. Alright, people, so if you're watching this stream on my phone, if I'm looking at you right now, you can keep watching here if you are content. That's fine. I'm gonna keep this phone that you're currently seeing me through. I'm gonna keep this running through the night. I'm even gonna sleep with it on me. So if you wanna, you know, do an endurance run with me, you can stay on that stream. Or I also just started a new live stream on my channel, which will have a little bit of a better view. And if we do web browsing stuff, you'll be able to see that. So you can, if you want to, have both streams open. Alright, so I'm just right now sending a link to my Discord server. And by the way, if any of you want to get into the Discord server, shoot me a DM on Twitter or email me or whatever. Obviously I can't let you in right now, but I can hook it up. Or do you want to come over here and we'll just do one last kind of screen?
Let me retweet the bit.
I didn't actually tweet it yet. I figure, no, we should check to make sure everything looks right one last time before we, that's usually how I do it.
Alright.
Is your patience being tested?
My patience is very short.
Yeah, well,
like me.
We're going to have to work on that.
Yeah, we will.
Yeah, okay, so don't share it with people yet. We will. Alright, looks good. Looks good. Make sure that's looking good. Good. No, we don't need to do that. Cool. So we do that. Nice dance moves. Alright, so that should be fine then. Now you can, now I'll tweet it and then you can retweet it. Alright, tweet it, so.
I'll see you.
Cool. Alright, make sure everything's copacetic. Alright, that's what I see right now. Yeah, lovely beginning. Alright, I'm just gonna get a drink and then we'll give people time to get in and then we'll go.
People are saying such nice things.
About what? Or where are they saying it from?
The stream has got very funny comments on it.
It's gonna annoy me. That'll be fine, right? You don't even have to pick that.
Good luck.
I have a good sense of space.
Have you?
Look at that. See how easy that
I see.
Alright, this is perfect. Let's go down.
Okay.
Doing it. Right. So,
Aww.
what?
Somebody called me a sweet Jewish princess.
Well, there you go. Alright, I think we're good to
We're
go.
ready to go. Hi.
Gonna go. Oh, wait. Do anything else? Put that back in. 1 second. I mean, people have been watching us for 3 hours straight. I think they'll last a little bit longer. I just want to make sure that this doesn't. It's good because people take some time to filter it and stuff. So I like to share the link.
This long delay is totally by design, not at all just, an
seriously,
accident.
I literally do that. It takes people about like 10 minutes between sending out a tweet and the
Stop
full amount of
dancing.
people.
Tattooed on your wrist. Oh, Adolf's
other
talking
jokes.
about
That's other
more.
jokes.
Yeah, I don't.
Don't encourage
I'm
them.
good.
All right, so we're good to go. Ready? There you go.
Yeah. You might want to turn off the music though.
Yes. We'll do a slow, gradual transition to fade to silence. I like your little hand dancing moves. All right, cool. So we're good to go. I think it was worthwhile the little bit of extra care and time that I put into getting the setup. Look at all
Making
this
it
space we
perfect.
have.
It's really nice.
We have
in
good
here.
light. We're comfortable, and we can take our time and hang out for as long as we want.
Yeah, it's good.
Cool. So let me just get all these screens done up so we can monitor here. And if we want to. So this is the first time that we have a guest live. So that's pretty fun. Ever since I started doing live streaming seriously, and I have all these different things going. So now we have a little bit of extra flexibility or power for what we could do. So if we come up if we come up with something that exists that we want to consult with on the internet, we now have 2 people and I can actually look stuff up and it would be relatively smooth. So for instance, this is Google. It's a really influential website. Some of you might have heard of it. So yeah, I'm just doing a quick.
We can Google things.
Just doing a quick dry run, making sure. As you can tell, I'm in a totally new room, and I set this up for this custom stream tonight. So just making sure everything's copacetic. If there's any problems with the audio or sound, can you tell me in the chat? Yes, there is a separate stream going on right now, but it really doesn't matter which one you're in. The separate stream, which is from my iPhone right here in the corner, that's going to be going all night. I'm going to sleep with that, so even while I'm sleeping, it's going to be pointed at me. Just because why not? Experimenting. All right. So what would you like to do, Diana? Would you like to kind of set the chat aside and not pay any attention to it, and you and I carry on our own conversation?
Talk about what's going on.
Or, okay, another option would be we just invite questions and we just work with those.
Oh, we can invite questions. Yeah,
we could do that after.
But there's been some stuff that's happened. I think we talked a little bit yesterday, but I said I would talk about my psychedelic retreat a little bit.
Yeah. All right.
That's a good little warm up.
So then let's set the chat aside for the most part.
Yeah, send it aside and I'll talk a little bit about it.
We're not going to look at the chat very much, but if you really want to get our attention, you know how you can. If you super chat, it's going to ping me on this iPad. See how teched out I am?
So teched out. So many screens. There is actually so many things going on.
Yeah, so if you really want to get our attention, you can super chat and we'll look at it. And as long as it's not some crazy, terrible trolling stuff, we'll probably speak it out loud. Other than that, we're just going to talk.
Yeah.
And then maybe we'll look at questions at the end, maybe, but maybe not.
So, Justin...
and no, I don't drink a lot of soy, is the answer. I genuinely
You're not a soy boy. Look at you. You got tiny boobs.
All right.
Hi.
So, you recently tripped on LSD.
No, it wasn't LSD. It was psilocybin.
Oh, right. Yeah, sorry.
So, that's legal. So, I went to... on a psychedelic retreat... in the UK, there is a psychedelic society, and they do psychedelic retreats in Holland. And I went on a women's-only psychedelic retreat in Holland.
Okay.
And so you all go, and the strange thing is, so the most psilocybin in the actual mushrooms is in the fruiting body, which is the mushrooms themselves. But there's a weird loophole in Holland where you can eat the mycelium, which are the roots of the mushroom, but not the actual fruiting body. So they grow what they call truffles. And I went to Holland, and it was a women's only retreat, and it was, there was a lot of magical thinking and ceremony, but I really enjoyed it. And I have to say that my view of all of the whatever magical thinking stuff we did really evolved over the course of the time. So I don't think I would ever do psychedelics again, probably without some kind of ceremonial
Oh, really?
Around it. Yeah, because it was just so much better.
Oh, really?
With that. And also, I think that it is a kind of unusual experience. If you frame it in a certain way, you get more out of it, than just kind of casually taking psychedelics.
Okay. Yeah. So maybe tell us about the ceremonial framing was so effective, and what were the effects?
Well, so, they have a lot of people there who've never done psychedelics before, and really psychedelics are all about how you frame them. So people who have a bad experience, like a lot of people have like a troubling experience, but the way that they frame it, and the way that I know a lot of people frame it, is the idea that whatever psychedelics are medicine, and that you can ask the psychedelics questions and you can get deep insight into your mind. And I don't really, I like the idea of personalizing the psilocybin and talking to it. I do like that. I myself didn't really do that. And I was probably the person who was fairly well experienced with psychedelics there. So it was 12 women. No, actually, it was 16 of us total. There was 4 facilitators. So 4 women who were sober. And then there were 12 of us who did what I would call like a heroic dose of psilocybin. Like, that was the most psilocybin I've ever done.
Was it so bad that you were kind of scared at any point? Was it like really difficult at any point?
My just general temperament is very happy and relaxed. So I've never had any kind of bad or even very troubling experience. There is a kind of a rocky period when you're coming down, when you feel anxious. But because it was an all-female, all women gathering or whatever, we were talking a lot about our mothers and our grandmothers, and I come from a family where the women in my family are really depressed and anxious generally. Okay. Like, I was spared that genetically for some reason. I'm just like my father and just like my grandfather. But my mother, very harsh anxiety and, contamination phobia and stuff. And my grandmother's the same way. And so there was a period, sort of a rocky period coming down, where I felt anxious. And I had my grandmother's necklace with me, and what I did, I kind of used that experience to empathize with them. And that's what a lot of people were doing, is a lot of people were having experiences where they were thinking about, experiences they had with their mothers and their grandmothers. And because it was a very woman-focused, feminine energy kind of thing. And so what they did is I had 2 packages of truffles, 44 grams. You grind them up really, really in a plastic bag. And then afterwards you take them in a ginger infusion, and the ginger infusion makes sure that you don't feel nauseous, which is really nice. And so we all get in together. It was like around 2 p.m. each of us either has a bed or like half of a couch. I was on a really big couch with this other woman who has my mother's name, so I was also thinking about my mom a lot. And then all of us take this like large dose. About half the people there had never taken psilocybin before.
Wow.
And 44 grams is a lot. So they come around and then you can ask the facilitators for anything. They'll come over and hold your hand. They will, it's really sweet. They'll bring you a glass of water. And that's part of the experience as well, is because you end up feeling really cared for.
So are you sitting in like a recliner or something?
Yeah, you're sitting, because you're taking such a high dose. It was such a high dose that I didn't know who I was for some period of time. I didn't know where I was. I didn't, and then also, we had all had blindfolds so that we could be blindfolded. So it's about, 7 hours.
Oh, blindfolded. You were blindfolded for 7
blindfolded.
hours?
No, not the whole time. I was blindfolded for some period of time because when you take that much, it's actually too full on to actually experience all of the visuals.
So the way that they guide it, what are they guiding you to? Like, how do they frame the larger experience?
So the experience, this is not like let's like take a bunch of psychedelics and watch stuff melt kind of experience. This is like you have an intention that you set for the trip, and that's why they gave us blindfolds. And it's a totally silent thing. None of us talk to each other.
Oh, really? You're not allowed to?
Well, I mean, there were people like socializing in the kitchen. At some point, they bring us out chocolate and sandwiches.
So the main gist of the experience is you're all sitting in separate seats and it's comfortable, but it's mostly like blindfolded. It's mostly a kind of inner quiet experience.
Yeah, so it's sort of a collective journey because we're all tripping, but it's also an individual journey in that each of us is having an individual kind of experience.
So because like when I do mushrooms, I want to like walk around and talk.
No, and you could go outside.
Not that quantity. But
they were really nice. Like all you have to do is raise your hand and be like, I want to go outside, and then somebody would take you outside. I did go outside for a little while, but it was freezing and it was already very cold in the room because the heat went out. For some period of time. So we all had blankets and they were bringing us like hot water bottles. And then in addition to that, there is this music that they use in psilocybin trials of depression, which really goes through, there's operatic music, there's kind of soaring, awesome music.
Oh, yeah?
There's quite cognitively, sort of string precise music. There's some quite sad strings. There's all different kinds of things.
They bring you through a progression of all these different types of music?
Yeah, so there's this progression of music, and everybody's listening to the same music. So that's another way that it's all collective.
Right, and you found it to be well orchestrated.
Yeah, although I was tripping so hard that the music, I wasn't even... So for many people, there were people who were like next to the speakers, this woman blindfolded, and they went on a whole journey that the music took them on. For me, there was probably an hour where I wasn't even aware that there was music playing, where I was completely like kind of egolessly just out.
Wow.
And then before we all did the psilocybin together, we went around in a circle and they did white sage on us, and they played, they had these tuning forks and they played this perfect fifth in our ears. And so it's really not so much about exactly precisely what you do. It's about feeling like you don't have anything contaminating you or making it difficult for you to have an experience.
No, that sounds pretty cool, to be honest.
Yeah,
I was just curious, like, what if the organizers, do they impose a kind of narrative on it, or not really at all?
No, not really. You can do whatever you want. I think I had sort of the lightest, kind of. I was just there because I'm going to be, moving in. Probably back to the States with my partner. I'm going to be leaving the UK. There's this whole fun chapter of my life that I'm going to be leaving behind. I'm planning on possibly having a family. There's all these things that I'm doing, and I kind of wanted it to be a bookmark in the celebratory period of my life to us, and I live really fast. Like, I see a lot of people, I travel a lot, yada yada, and my life is about to get much slower. And so it was sort of a transition from fast to slow to me. But there were people there who had serious things that they, and then there were the facilitators. They had like individual meetings with each of us where they were talking to us about, what our intention was, what we wanted to get out of it. And I did feel a little bit like a teenager saying, I just like really feel like, this is the safest place for me. Because generally if I do psychedelics with my friends, I end up, because I always have a good experience and because I find everything really fluffy and happy, to have a bit of an intense experience with them. Like sometimes so I had nobody else that I had to take care of. But I did have sort of because you introduced me to all these like NRX people, and I've been thinking about whatever decay. So if you go to Amsterdam, there's this work by the old Dutch masters, which shows things like, pheasants hanging dead and fruit that's rotting and flies on things. And there's just sort of the beauty of decay artwork that the old Dutch masters do. I don't know if you've ever
What
been
museum?
to...
I've been to Amsterdam a couple times. What museum are you talking about?
I think it's Rijksmuseum.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they have stuff like that there. And the Dutch seem to be, in some sense, more, I guess, comfortable with decay. And I was thinking a lot about civilization, this fight against entropy, the fight against chaos, the fight towards order, but how chaos always gets inside. I mean, we had started the ceremony, for example, about an hour and a half later than we had intended to, because of various circumstances that I didn't know about, because they kept all that, they really want to insulate us from any concerns. So probably because they couldn't get the heat in the room working. That's probably why.
Oh, so they need everything to be perfect before they start.
So they really wanted it to be, and they had like little sandwiches. They had everything ready for us. Yeah.
That sounds pretty fun.
We were really babysat. Like, I've never felt so...
Yeah, and that sounds fun. I mean, the handful of times that I've done psychedelics, it was always a very chaotic DIY kind of circumstances. Yeah. So I'm kind of curious. You definitely make a good case that it sounds like it would be a good thing. How much was it? I'm curious. It
was... well, now they've increased the price. So this was, you stay there Thursday, Friday, Saturday.
Oh, wow.
It's all the food's included, and of course the facilitation of the ceremony, but not the travel and not the truffles included. It was 500 quid.
Okay.
It's going to be 800 quid.
Oh wow!
Coming
so you
out.
Got in at a good time.
I got in at a fairly good time, and it's still like it sells out every time. But one last thing I was going to say is that, so we have I had a cup of tea, and I had put that out in front of myself. And then I had taken it to the kitchen, and they don't move any of your stuff, because you know what it's like if you're tripping and you leave a cup of tea out and somebody cleans it away. You're going to think, you know, what is happening. You're having an existential dread about it. So I found that, and I was in the kitchen, and somebody had collected a bunch of objects from outside. So on the kitchen counter was like a Kleenex, like with some tissue that somebody had blown their nose into, and a pine cone, and there was some rinds of fruit. And I really just focused on that. And it seemed to me at that point, and this was hours into the trip, like one of those Dutch masters' paintings of decay. And then that was the catalyst for me to start thinking about, I'm decaying. There's another thing, your hands look really old sometimes when you're...
Skin is known for being like a very mysterious thing on mushrooms.
Because mushrooms make me feel really happy, I don't have the same... Some people had a really anxious time, and everybody had a very different kind of time. There are people who really had whatever social anxiety, and they felt like really desensitized by this trip. Not me. I was just, having a fun, whatever, rollicking time. But my own decay seemed really funny to me. Like the fact that I was aging and dying also seemed very amusing at the time. So that was that. I think that kind of existential dread is something that you can at least have a playful feeling about. I did anyway, have a very playful feeling about it.
So I respect very much that you don't have any qualms about sharing this stuff publicly, given that...
It was totally legal, and also...
Well, that's what I thought, but that's what I said, but that doesn't always get you off the hook for different types of academic complaints.
I think Michael Pollan, so about a quarter of the women there, and somebody can tell this, I should tell this to Michael Pollan, were there because of How to Change Your Mind, which is that book by Michael Pollan.
Oh, really?
And Michael Pollan
What percentage did you say?
4 out of the 12 women there had read How to Change Your Mind.
Wow.
Or no, it's 3 actually. That's a quarter. So, and a bunch of people have read that. And so a lot of people, that's brought greater respectability to tripping.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The drugs were 40 euros in case anybody... Yeah, the truffles were 40 euros.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I was so surprised to get in trouble for doing mushrooms in Amsterdam. Because it's legal, so I don't see what could be the problem.
You're at a university that's, like, too good, obviously.
Well, no comment.
I care about your personal life.
No comment.
Yeah.
But, like, so, for instance, like, right now, like, talking about your experience doing drugs, you're not totally unfazed about any type of career implications that might have.
There's so many academics that have done psychedelics.
I know.
It's
and
like,
that's what I think too.
And I've told you this before, but I'll tell the audience this. Justin got in touch with me on Twitter and sent me a direct message and said, "You live close to me. Let's hang out. You look interesting," because you're super extroverted and you're like that. You're kind of open to experience in that way. And I looked through your Instagram and I saw that video where, is it okay for me to say?
Oh, sure.
Where you were tripping and you were talking about child's pose and yoga and how that was a safe place. And that was actually what made me say, definitely I want to hang out with you and be your friend, is because I thought that you had to have balls and be open to experience and be cool in order to do that. So, yeah.
That's sweet. And you arguably count as an academic contact. So in some sense, you can make the case that doing drugs on the internet as an academic is good for your academic career and promotes academic advancement.
That's right. Well, if advancement was getting to know me, that's I'm very flattered. Thank you.
Academic networking.
That's right. Yeah, totally. And yeah, if you talk to, I was at a conference recently and I was talking to 10 people and over dinner, and if you just say, here's done psychedelics, more than half of people had.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I'm sure the percentage for something like cannabis is even higher. Like everyone smokes cannabis.
Everybody gets high.
And everyone is supposed to act like no one smokes it. Cut me a break.
Yeah. Openness to experience is one of the big 5 characteristics.
That's right. Did you have any significant personality changes due to your experience?
I do think that you can increase your openness to experience with psychedelics.
But did you?
I had a real shift in empathy. So you know what I'm like. I'm kind of like I'm like a bitch, and I'm kind of well, I'm not very prone to guilt. I'm not very prone to like emotional contagion, that kind of thing. People were talking about their experiences and their feelings, and people were crying, and I cried more that weekend than I think I have in like the previous 2 years.
Oh, wow.
And it was people just telling me stuff like, my mother said this cruel thing to me, and it made me sad when I was 8, and I would just be like, I was like, and I was really engaged with these people in a way that I hadn't been. And we had a whole thing afterwards, the day afterwards. So sometimes if you do psychedelics with friends or whatever, the next day you'll feel kind of raw and a bit sensitive, and it can be really bad. But this group, we were doing all these ceremonies the next day, and we were doing these exercises where I would, like, let's say I said to you, what does freedom mean to you, Justin? And I asked you that over and over again for 5 minutes, and you end up digging deeper beyond. So it's actually for people, these exercises are really for people who are very inhibited. I'm very uninhibited.
I can imagine, yeah.
So it wasn't any kind of revelatory thing for me. But
I can imagine if you're like a normie middle-aged mom or something like that, and you're like really bottled up, and you have a lot of shit that you've never really told anyone in years, and you feel frustrated in different ways, like that type of normal middle-aged person probably benefits
it was
the
women
most.
Between 24, I think the oldest woman there was like 70, and I was probably around the kind of average age there. But people really feeling more open. And then we did this thing where we ritualized making promises to ourselves. We wrote a letter to our future selves that they're going to send us. And so there's a whole bunch of other therapeutic, magical stuff that went into that weekend. And because of the psychedelics, I just felt way less cynical about everything than I would normally feel. So I just felt really, really happy and really engaged with other people and empathetic in a way that I haven't in a long time. So it was really worth it for me, and one of the most remarkable experiences I've had this year. Yeah.
Wow. So that's a pretty strong endorsement of the kind of organized retreat format.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say it wasn't like perfectly organized. Like I had problems with that, but they had, when we went over time, for example, it was because they got carried away with all of us singing together, and they weren't like, okay, now you guys can go to bed. And they really wanted us all to be together for everything. So it was probably a little bit cloying for some people in that way. And then there were people who needed a lot of time alone. But for example, there was a woman who had been once before, who is, had a young child and lived in London, and she just didn't want to leave the room after we all finished eating in the evening. And she was a French speaker. So there was another woman who spoke French, and they slept next to each other on little beds on the floor, and they just let her stay there as long as she wanted. Anything that anybody needed, it was just totally obvious that they were going to let people do what they needed to do. And it was really sweet. Yeah, it was really sweet.
That sounds really nice. I think there's a good opportunity for kind of DIY versions of that, where it's like way cheaper, and kind of organized among friends.
Yeah, I think...
Well, like your friend does that. I won't shout her out.
I have friends who organize stuff like that. Obviously, this was all legal, which was the nice thing about it. But right. I absolutely think that, I could facilitate something, but probably not as well as somebody who's like a much bigger hippie than me.
Sure.
Because these women were really in a state of mind all the time, where they were talking about singing and feeling feminine energy and about how everything's going to work out perfectly. They had this Panglossian view of the world. They were all dressed really colorfully, and they do cacao ceremonies and stuff like that. Like, I could do something like that, but it wouldn't go far enough for some people, I think. Maybe for somebody like you, I could facilitate something that would have just the right amount of magical thinking.
Wow.
But I would probably feel inauthentic doing something.
You'd have to kind of
far
ham
out
it
as they
up
did.
playing that type of persona.
Yeah.
So we could talk about many other things also, if you feel like you've exhausted that. I was thinking you might want to talk about your book.
Mm-hmm.
Or you might not.
I'm writing a book. Well, I'm writing a book proposal still. And it's called How to Train Your Boyfriend. And so I just reread the book proposal today. I hadn't touched it in about a month. And the basic premise is that we all use behaviorism intuitively with other people. And that if you can train a worm, for example, or a bird or a turtle, just using rewards and punishments very quickly after the behavior, then why wouldn't that ability to do that be ingrained in us to do with other people?
Maybe we could play a game where I tell you some behavioral issue I have with Arya or that she might have with me, and then you can give me specific advice on how we might train each other out of it. Does that sound like a good game or no?
Sure, if you want to.
Just a proposal.
Yeah, absolutely.
We could do anything we want, and it's my live stream, so.
Yeah. Oh.
Are you interested in the chat?
We will leave that alone. Go on.
Yeah, generally when a comment in the chat is written by someone named Adolf Hitler, I don't read too much further. Right, so I literally didn't even make heads and tails of what it said. So, all right, how about, for instance, well, Arya, every now and then she gets it into her mind that she's allowed to have her own opinions and exercise some discretion over the future course of our life. So how can I make it so that anytime she becomes so plainly willful, she knows not to do that?
So occasionally I spend time with women who I'll just slightly change the premise, who for whatever reason, the way that they've been socialized or whatever, tell stories that have a rambling style to them.
Okay.
Let's say there are, this is like a hey.
Hey. Sorry to interrupt. Keep going.
No, it's okay.
And so it can happen. So that I was hanging out with a woman like this, and she would occasionally interrupt me to tell a story that went nowhere. I'll just be really putting out 2.5 minutes. And just not making eye contact at all and looking disinterested works very well with women. Doesn't always work well with men because men are, I think, less sensitive to changes in facial expression.
I see.
And they notice it less often. But
Okay.
With women, you can do a lot with just looking disinterested and looking away and stopping eye contact. Exactly.
What? Oh, I'm sorry. Did I suddenly convey that I wasn't interested in that?
Yeah, and obviously, women and men. So I think that one thing that men learn how to do, even if men are let's say you have a man and a woman and they're born equally socially adept and equally verbally adept and equally have the same IQ. Let's say you have a kind of, the only thing they really differ on is sex. They're similarly attractive, for example. A man will learn how to generate verbal humor and stories and things like that because that's how he can have sex. And if the woman is similarly attractive, people are going to indulge her and let her talk about whatever she wants and whatever. Okay. And also she's going to get more traction by appreciating humor than by generating humor. When somebody says they want their partner to have a good sense of humor, men usually mean I want somebody who laughs at my jokes, and women usually mean I want someone who generates humor, right?
Interesting.
Women who generate humor are unusual, just I think it purely as a result of behaviorist socialization.
Uh-huh.
So women, if a woman is attractive, she's going to be somewhat indulgent in how much she talks and what she talks about. And so I think that you can help that out. So if Arya was being willful or she was doing something like that, I think if you just stopped making eye contact or looked away, or you could bring up something that she finds unsettling or embarrassing. But what does the kids these days say, on the low. So you could say, oh, remember that time that, you threw up on the street? That was funny.
Just do that right after she does something that I don't like?
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. And what about for her? Like if let's say, for instance, a problem like I'm often late to things. I'm like 10 minutes late to every single thing I ever say I'm going to be to.
Really?
Yeah.
I did just experience that.
She's good. She's good about not really caring. She's adjusted to it. But let's say, hypothetically, she hated it and she really wanted to train me out of that. What would she do?
So one thing that you can do, let's say that you have dinner on the table at a certain time and then people don't show up on time. What you do is you calculate how long it takes them to come down to the table for dinner, and then let's say they come down 12 minutes after you usually say. So the first time they come down 12 minutes later, you give them their food. But the next time they come down 12 minutes later, you will have removed the food, right?
Okay.
So you take the proximity of the reinforcement and you move it closer and closer to the cue that you want.
Okay.
And so that's one thing that she could do, is like just not be there when you show up.
So if I'm late for something, just withhold the thing that...
Yeah, withhold the thing. Obviously, lying to you and telling you that things start earlier than they do is what most people do with late people. Okay. And that's actually probably exacerbates the problem.
Yeah, because then you think you get away with it.
Yeah, it's like women faking orgasm, and then what happens to men? They just start to think that they're better at bed than they are, and then that doesn't teach them anything. Just the same way with, if you came up late, then... you start to think more and more like, oh, well, I came late, but then I was always on time. So you wouldn't actually experience the bad repercussions for your behavior.
So faking orgasms does not help relationships generally.
I mean, I think no. I think women do it obviously to a great extent, but I think that it generally, it depends on how, where somebody's at. Like if somebody's really on the precipice of doing everything you want, it can be a way of encouraging them. And it can be a small reinforcement you use. But if somebody's very far away from the goal of how good in bed that you would like them to be, and you fake orgasms, then they're going to get reinforcement very far off from the behavior that you actually want.
Okay. How often do women do that?
How often do women what? Fake orgasms? I think I can't remember what I did a lecture on this the other day. Was it? I mean, the majority of women said that they have, but I don't know how often they...
Right, sure. I was just curious.
Yeah.
Well, I was thinking, do you want me to look up that thing you were telling me about, the animated Nick Bostrom?
Yeah, let's watch that.
Good?
That'd be really good. And I'll take a little break.
Yeah, feel free to take a break. Also, people, we have media power, so if you want us to watch something or react to something, that would be maybe fun if you want to suggest things. So, what does it say? Justin, I'm not repeating this. Why are you calling me a worm? What did I do that is worm-like? Alright, I will look up. Let's look up this thing she was telling me about. Nick Bostrom animated video. Diana? Is it called The Unfinished Fable of the Sparrows?
That's right.
Okay. 3 minutes and 34 seconds.
Is that fine with
Yeah,
everybody?
yeah.
Cool. It's so good.
Let's make sure the
my personal opinion.
audio is good. I'm out of the frame. Sorry, I have to get a little closer to you.
The Unfinished Fable of the Sparrows. It was the nest building season, but after days of long, hard work, the sparrows sat in the evening glow, relaxing and chirping away. We are all so small and weak. Imagine how easy life would be if we had an owl who could help us build our nests. Yes, said another, and we can use it to look after our elderly and our young. It could give us advice and keep an eye out for the neighborhood cat, added a third. Then past us the elder bird spoke. Let us send out scouts in all directions and try to find an abandoned owlet somewhere, or maybe an egg. A crow chick might also do, or a baby weasel. This could be the best thing that ever happened to us, at least since the opening of the pavilion of unlimited grain in yonder backyard. The flock was exhilarated, and sparrows everywhere started chirping at the top of their lungs. Only Skronkfingle, a one-eyed sparrow with a fretful temperament, was unconvinced of the wisdom of the endeavor. Quoth he,
This will surely be our undoing. Should we not give some thought to the art of owl domestication and owl taming first, before we bring such a creature into our midst?
replied Pastus. Taming an owl sounds like an exceedingly difficult thing to do. It will be difficult enough to find an owl egg. So let us start there. After we have succeeded in raising an owl, then we can think about taking on this other challenge.
There is a flaw in that plan,
Squeaked Skronkfingle. But his protests were in vain, as the flock had already lifted off to start implementing the directive set out by Pastus. Just 2 or 3 sparrows remained behind. Together, they began to try to work out how owls might be tamed or domesticated. They soon realized that Pastus had been right. This was an exceedingly difficult challenge, especially in the absence of an actual owl to practice on. Nevertheless, they pressed on as best they could, constantly fearing that the flock might return with an owl egg before a solution to the control problem had been found.
It is not known how the story ends, but the author dedicates his book to Skrumpfinkel and his followers. Is that the end?
I'm just shocked that it only has 13, not even 12,000 views. It's so good.
So is this made by the book publisher?
Yeah, I think so.
Cool. That's cute.
And
Oh, I get it. It's the owl here. Very
Yeah.
nice. Very
Yeah,
nice
yeah, yeah.
brand integration.
Yeah. So I think it's a very, yeah.
That was interesting.
So
Is
I
the-
mean, I've read Superintelligence, but I'm not an expert on obviously anything about AI control or anything like that.
Well, I'm not an expert in it either, but that doesn't mean we can't pontificate about it.
Let's talk about it for whatever reason.
Yeah, well, actually, we could talk about that for a little bit if you want to, unless you just have nothing. We've had debates about it before.
Yeah, so I know that there's people that you keep company with who think that there's just no way possible that AI can in any way be controlled, and that it's just so far outside the human extent of cognition. And obviously, I don't know because I haven't worked on it. I know some people who work at Miri and who work at OpenAI, who work at various different organizations, and they think that there's some way of considering it. And certainly Nick Bostrom is one of the smartest people I've ever met. So it does make me feel better, but I don't even know if I'm smart enough to consider the cognition of the people who are working on it, let alone the AI itself.
Yeah, I don't think I buy that. I mean, I understand that people can be working on very specific types of mathematical and engineering questions, like the Miri people. They're working on what they think are very important, kind of cutting-edge technical questions.
Yeah.
And, I mean, yeah, that's fine. I have nothing but respect for that. It's interesting stuff. But to me, like, the real way that collective superintelligence is operating in a profound way is at a kind of society level. Like, it's capitalism. Like, global capitalism is a loosely integrated collective superintelligence. Like, even within Nick Bostrom's model, like, he says that. And so, to me, it's like that's the force that's operating at a level that we have no control over. And that's increasing on its own logic and I just don't see any mechanism through which kind of human intervention would be able to somehow route around that. And I don't think any of the problems that, the Miri people are trying to solve right now, technically, are even really trying to operate on at that level.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's just a different level of analysis in some sense. I don't really know why exactly Nick Bostrom goes over so quickly, why he kind of passes over so quickly when he talks about how capitalism is a loosely integrated collective superintelligence. Like
I've never heard him talk about it at all.
Yeah, he says that in the book. But he kind of poo-poos that as if because it's loosely integrated, it's not as significant.
I honestly don't know what you could glean from it. Do you think that if somebody actually studied the loosely...
No, you might not be able to glean anything. It's not a matter of gleaning. It's a matter of knowing what's happening right now. It's a matter of knowing what's happening. So, like, the argument that I would make, and I think a lot of people would make, is from in the crowds that I'm kind of more involved in, is that there are ineluctable pressures on human beings right now to be constantly increasing their intelligence power.
Yeah.
And that's imposed by market competition, right? And so we can think all we want, and we can write as many books and working papers as we want on the control problem, but it's not going to matter. Like, even if somehow we technically solve the so-called control problem, there are still these ineluctable incentives for actors to route around any possible technical. So, like, even if you had some kind of specifically defined technical instantiation of the control problem solved, that doesn't
mean that there would be some other actor that wouldn't actually route around that.
Or, like, it doesn't give you a lever at the level of analysis that it's most significantly operating on, which is the collective social system level, I think. So it's like, you might be able to, like, Yudkowsky and folks might be able to solve the control problem and be able to create a kind of machine superintelligence that they can, guarantee is not going to get out of the box or something like that. I'll even grant them that maybe they can do that. But the social and political problem of stopping the next guy, there's no solution for that. That's baked deeply into capitalism. The necessity of that coming is baked deeply into capitalism. Is what I would.
I'll just try to say that I'm like speaking from a position of ignorance, but it reminds me a little bit about, for example, if you have a bacteria growing in a petri dish with antibiotics, it necessarily is not able to grow as fast as it normally would because the antibiotics are keeping it. So that you could say a little bit like that's like a little bit like an AI. Like, let's say an AI is growing in intelligence with the moral constraints or the human constraints that people have put on it as a seed. And yet if somebody else made an AI that had no such constraints, it might actually be able to accelerate much more quickly than one that actually has constraints put on it by humans. Yeah. So in some sense, you would say that the unconstrained AI would always beat out the constrained AI. Mm-hmm. Well, I'm saying that. Which would make it impossible. Although people have talked about how, in the future, who knows what kinds of resources you would need to make such an AI, but people have said one good use of a policing force or governmental forces or whatever would be to actually intervene if somebody was on the precipice of developing something like that, right?
Right.
But it would be impossible to police entirely if it was easy enough to do, which it might be.
Yeah, and that's where I think the political debate kind of gets interesting, because a lot of the AI safety stuff, I think, finds itself implicitly going down the political route of some sort of like one world government kind of necessity. Mm-hmm. Like a lot of them actually, are pretty explicit about that. Like I've been reading, I'm in the middle of Max Tegmark's book. I think it's called Life 3.0.
Yeah.
And he's very involved in all that sort of stuff. And a lot of the practical initiatives associated with the AI safety people are, nonprofit types of social and political organizations that are basically trying to organize at a global level to exercise like political control in some sense. Like that seems to be.
You're and I think other people have said this too, that the kinds of policing and coordination you would need are probably impossible, but also they would have really bad alternative ramifications. Like if you had enough coordination to actually prevent anybody from developing an AI that was unconstrained by human morality, then you would also have a force that could, clamp down on all kinds of other speech and endeavors that would be possibly, important or beneficial, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like if it's the threat of super intelligence exploding in some sort of uncontrolled way, and the only alternative to that is some sort of like, if we're being told we have to kind of invest all of our political energy and power into some sort of like super powerful, kind of controlling organization to prevent that. That's a kind of either or situation that I would be inclined to reject. Like, this is where I think like the kind of right accelerationist versus left accelerationist kind of politics, like that political cleavage is not just, this is where I think it's not just like a make-believe like internet conflict game, but it's actually a really substantive cleavage, I think, because this would be the point of that cleavage emerging in a significant way. Like, you'd have to decide, do you take your chances on the free, self-improvement of intelligence itself, whatever that might lead to, or do you go for like overarching global political control? You do have to kind of choose.
Yeah, you do kind of have to choose. So the more I've gotten into kind of behaviorism, and the more I have become cynical about freedom as a value. So, everybody's seen Clockwork Orange, and in Clockwork Orange, that guy has his free will encumbered in some way. So he becomes nauseous and feels terrified when he engages in any violence. And the genius of the film and the book are that you identify with him and you hope that he can enjoy his criminality even at the expense of the lives of other people. So it at least makes you feel conflicted, but it also can make you feel that, like, the protagonist or the anti-hero, whatever you want to call him, you feel bad that he's had his behavior constrained in some way, because in some sense we're all rooting for human freedom, even though it doesn't really exist in any way, shape, or form. And so one thing that I was thinking about is people are really upset about this, Chinese social value or scoring system, where if you could look at somebody's face and you can see over their head some score that is the compilation of how many loans have they not repaid, how many times have they jaywalked, how much money they've donated to the Communist Party, whatever the case may be. And all of us have something like that system in us. Like, I can tell by looking at somebody at above a chance level how extroverted, how psychopathic somebody is. So people vary in their abilities, but everybody has some capability of inferring how good or bad an actor somebody is just by looking at their face or with really thin slice information. And so nobody has a problem with that because it's natural. And nobody has a problem with that because it's not that good. You would never say, what we should really do is intervene so that people who are better at telling whether or not someone is a psychopath should actually we should give somebody a pill so that we're all equally bad at telling if somebody's a psychopath, right? Right now there's an uneven playing field. And with this Chinese scoring system, you would be, of course they have a lot of other stuff thrown in there, but let's for argument's say that there was some scoring system that we could all objectively agree was telling you how much somebody defected in social interactions with others, right? People would still have discomfort or problem with that, even though it's just a better and improved version of stuff that we're actually able to do.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
I'm quite keen on, like, super rigorous accountability mechanisms, as long as they're reliable.
Yeah.
And, like, to me, my beef with that is, because I've written some blog posts recently, actually, about the possible prospect of basically implementing this type of, like, social control technology, but doing it democratically and autonomously. Yeah. Like, my sense is that this sort of thing is kind of baked into capitalism right now, and you're going to see that sort of thing more and more. It's just inevitable that our current institutions that are already doing this kind of like social measurement implicitly, they always have been, they're just going to get more and more sophisticated with the development of machine learning and stuff like that. So China is like a little bit out in front in what it might look like, but
well, they're also going to stay out in front. We talked about this before, because they only have, they don't have very many different ethnic groups, and so. I just listened to a John Danaher interview with this woman whose name I forget. I will find it in a minute. But about algorithms and how, for example, there's an algorithm that says that you should investigate people for child abuse. So it generates a risk score. And people have said we shouldn't have this algorithm in place because it gives you different risk scores for child abuse for different ethnic groups. So it's more likely to return a bad child abuse score. Like, CPS is more likely to investigate black families as compared to white families based on the score. And so what they've done, instead of they've pulled the algorithm, because the algorithm that shows the differences is predictive. And if they actually get rid of that, then it's no longer predictive. And I'm not going to go into all that unless somebody really wants me to. But China, because it's very homogenous, they are going to be able to take these kinds of algorithms and this kind of AI and not constrain it because of whatever political concerns. They have less political concerns anyway, but yeah.
Right. Well, I mean, my beef with it all is that I would just rather the idea of being held strictly to account for my behavior.
Yeah.
I'm not repulsed by that. I think that's really cool, and that's something humans should generally desire. We should desire strong constraints on our own bad behavior. My beef with it is you really don't want the government doing that. Is my view, and you don't want. Like, you don't want a combination of the government and basically kind of like market logic governing you in that way from the outside in this kind of top-down way. But my attitude is like, if this is coming down the pike anyway, we should actually, as groups of friends and as social circles, just design our own infrastructure for basically imposing these types of systems on ourselves now before, you know, the like government-led formats really like get their tenterhooks in us. But that's just
Do you think
one
that
of my harebrained plots.
That would spare us in some way?
Yeah, I think so, because we would just make ourselves really, really good people way quicker. You know what I'm saying?
But obviously it'd be more difficult for us to develop those systems than it is for the government to develop those systems.
I don't think so, actually. I mean, it's weird is the main problem. Like, most people don't want this is the main problem.
So you're saying that we should opt into our own benevolent totalitarian control?
Yeah, like small group, autonomous, democratic, collective dictatorships that are radically democratic and transparent. It's basically the Rousseauian general will is what I'm hearkening back to. So we could basically, we could move into a big house, you and me, a bunch of people. There would be like really, really strict rules about, like, we would define as a group what we genuinely think is ideal behavior, you know, including like what we think is the appropriate range of freedom. So like, it wouldn't have to be very exacting. If you want to be really exacting, we could be exacting. It can accurately reflect our ideal preferences as a community. But once we have those preferences and we're clear on them, we should be draconian about their enforcement, is my view. And you can basically set up systems where this is all done in the background through machine intelligence.
So you're saying that it should be okay for us to even engage in, you know, like, let's think about Clockwork Orange style stuff. Like, it would be okay for us, somebody can opt in to being conditioned really harshly against some behavior that they think is destructive.
Yeah. So here, let me give you an example. I've kind of written about a few different examples, but here's one I was thinking about today, actually, when we were talking about something earlier. Let's say, like, you want to have a community and you all prize, like, greater sexual freedom, for instance.
Yeah.
But you have primary partners.
Yeah.
And so you all want more freedom, but you're all afraid of, like, cheating and things going sour. Let's just say as a possible test case, just a thought experiment. You could do something like, okay, people decide to be poly or whatever, but in every room there's, like, a video camera, and no one gets to see the video camera. Yeah. No one gets access to it. It's, like, blocked off with, like, you know, encryption or whatever. People can't access it. Yeah. And that can be hard-coded. But there are some, like, face detection or body detection algorithms running on a server in the background. Yeah. And if someone's partner who's, like, not supposed to be in my bedroom after the midnight is in my bedroom at midnight, my partner is, like, going to get a message letting her know that, you know, that sort of thing. That's just a thought experiment. Like, you could imagine a bunch of different versions of that.
How about a shock collar?
Yeah, or a shock collar, yeah. Or you could imagine that, exactly. You could do any number of those different types of things at a level of severity that you want. So it doesn't have to be any more, you know, oppressive than people desire. But basically my attitude is, like, we should, that those sorts of technologies are underutilized. And if it's coming down the pike in a kind of social, political, top-down way, we should get after it. We should get out in front of it and discipline ourselves into being way better people as soon as possible.
It's funny because generally what happens is that other people, like, I say that we actually don't know the limits of environmental control because people find even very minor forms of environmental control, like a scoring system or, like, being punished very, very quickly. So they call that celerity, like, after you do a bad action, which is what they're doing in China. Like, you jaywalk and then immediately you're like, there's this honor system where you know, your name is put up and you feel embarrassed. So that's, like, an immediate form of punishment. And lots of people are disgusted or if they feel uncomfortable with that kind of thing. And yet you just, you know, told me something that I think is an encumbrance on freedom. I think everybody wants there to be loopholes so that they can break the rules themselves, and
So
maybe
that they can
that's
be
why,
bad people.
Yeah, that's why people like find these forms of very hard control disgusting or unsettling, is because it's fine for us to have these forms of social control if they're imperfect, because that means all of us have loopholes that we can figure out.
Right.
But if they're really perfect, we actually don't want to be held to the standards perfectly.
Right. But that's like the definition of being a bad person. That's an addiction to sinfulness. Like,
now you've gotten into a whole nother thing.
No, but isn't it? You're exactly right. Like we all really want there to be ways to cheat. Like we want freedom to be bad people. And my attitude is like, if you self-impose, if you autonomously organize and you create your own system to basically tie your own hands from being sinful, then you're not being oppressed. You're forcing yourself to be free.
Oh, because
you're authoring it.
If you have those systems in place, then your freedom is going to you're free to be good.
Absolutely.
It reminds me a little bit because I use Freedom, which is the app or website blocking thing, and from 7 to 11 I can't get on certain websites, and so instead of saying you're blocked from this website, it says you are free from this website. Nice. Right, you have freedom. And then I know another couple, and when they exchanged wedding vows, they said, with this ring I set you free. So in some sense, that being constrained to be good or being accountable to someone to be good is actually the freedom. What kind of freedom is that? Is that the freedom to be your best?
Definitely, yeah. That's the whole Rousseauian model. That's like forcing yourself to be free.
I didn't.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or what do you mean? What kind of freedom?
I don't know if I've ever read Rousseau in the original form. I just know Rousseauianism.
Yeah,
generally.
I mean that's like his basic model. I think basically. Yeah. So that's something I've written about, and people find it horribly fascistic. But it's a crucial condition that it's self-imposed. Like if it's self-imposed, it's not fascistic. The reason I think people have such negative intuitions about this sort of thing is because the whole history of this is generally some sort of like larger, more powerful actor imposing this on people. And that's rightfully seen as oppressive. Like you don't want some outside agent imposing such systems on you. But if you can alter them yourself and have complete creative control over the terms, then I think that's a game changer.
Would you need like an isolated community to do that, like a kind of patchwork thing to do that?
You would need some number of other people who are also interested in doing that. Is all you would really need. But I don't see why people couldn't exit whenever they want. So if you don't like it, you can walk away. How fascist can something be?
But obviously, what you're talking about is that system would make sure that everybody was, maximally virtuous and efficient. And so, I think, I don't know if you're talking about efficiency or goodness in a group, kind of a group level selection model. But yeah, I'd never thought about that. What's the blog called that you wrote about that?
Just a thought. I did a few of them. I forget what they were called. I think one was I called it like a few different things at different times. One was like techno-feudal communism, or no, neo-feudal techno-communism. Because basically the idea kind of builds on certain norms in medieval times, basically. Yeah. And but using like digital technologies. So I lay it out. I kind of sketch out the model with reference to things like artificial intelligence and blockchain, basically. Like I think those would be the two kind of emerging technologies that you could basically hook them up together and implement this type of system, like pretty powerfully, I think.
That's amazing.
Just a crazy thought.
I liked it.
Thank you. So, what do you think? Should we take questions, or do you have any other thoughts on your mind?
Let's take some little questions.
I feel like given my usual pretty long-term stamina when it comes to live streaming, I feel like pretty tired.
Yeah, let's.
But it's because we've been writing all day, probably.
Yeah, we have been writing all day. We'll take if people ask us a few questions. I think we can do like 5 more minutes.
Oh, that's a nice one.
Yeah, that's really good.
Mr. Hitler is a really constructive member of the
Dr.
community.
Hitler to you.
Let's see.
Okay, ask questions, you guys. Otherwise, we're going to just log off.
How long has it even been?
It's been an hour.
Okay, that's
good. We have given people their total, not any money's worth.
Oh, we've given them more than their money's worth. That's for sure.
Okay, scroll down. You guys, if you have a question, ask it immediately.
Okay. Yeah.
And if we like it, we'll ask it.
Thoughts on Ram Dass?
I don't know that.
He's like a guru guy.
No.
Do you consider yourself white?
Who, me?
Yeah. I don't know what the hell else you would consider yourself. But...
Depends on, yes and no, and that's not a very satisfactory question.
Oh, and no? In what way no? Because Jewish? Or what?
Well, I'm also Latina by many many standards. It really depends. I don't think that the kind of, whether you're white or not is very well defined, and I think that there's a lot of nebulous stuff about how ethnic groups are defined, and I think it's by design. But am I white? Yeah, usually I think I am, yeah.
Gio, I will follow you back on Twitter. I don't know why I'm not. It's not conscious. Do you have any thoughts on Terrence McKenna? Have you ever read him?
Yeah, I have read some Terrence McKenna, but a long time ago.
What do you think? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I think that psychedelics are really important to do, and I think that I think a lot of people who write a lot on psychedelics have more magical thinking than I'm personally comfortable with because of the psychedelics that they've done. So I think does he have the stoned ape hypothesis? I think some of that stuff is ludicrous.
Yeah.
But I think it's fanciful and amusing, and I think that's worth something.
Okay, here's an edgy one.
Would I have cybernetic implants in my head? Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, that's an easy one. I was going to ask you, do you want to, you can just say no comment if you want.
Yeah.
How do you feel about government-enforced eugenics?
Government-enforced eugenics. So I don't think that the government should obviously sterilize people or force people to breed. I think that that's terrible. What I do think that if the government doesn't supply any social safety net at all, like if we had a completely anarchistic government, then eugenics would happen by itself. And that's actually what happened for hundreds of years in Europe. When there was no social safety net, people who worked hard and were smart had tons of kids. People who didn't work hard and were smart, they had no kids or their kids died. So that was a sort of eugenic process that happened on its own. If the government is giving people money, however, then I think that there should be incentives if people want. So there's a woman who's got a project in the United States called Project Prevention, and what she does is she gives people $300 to either get on long-term birth control or become sterilized. And she came over here to the UK, and she paid for the vasectomy of a 42-year-old heroin addict. And the British really had a massive problem with that. And that guy said, I would have chosen this option myself if I could have, but people think it's coercive to offer addicts money, for example. But I think that that's like a very low-level thing. What happens already in the United States is you take away addicts' children. Why do you take away the children of addicts? Like if somebody's so addicted to heroin that they don't do anything and they don't work and they live in a squalid environment, you take away their kids because you think it's going to be bad for the kids in the long run. So really, if you think it's going to be bad for the kids in the long run to be with their birth parents, then you could just go one step further, and I don't think it's a big step further, and incentivize people who are addicted to drugs and alcohol to not have children. You just give them some incentive. Because what happens in humans, and everybody knows this, is that we have children accidentally. So there's a Nick Bostrom thing which is called, the reversal test. So let's say that a bunch of heroin addicts did a batch of heroin that caused them to become sterile. And there was 40 of them, and they all became sterile by doing some bad batch of heroin. Would we say that the government should intervene and pay money to help them regain their fertility, to reinstate their fertility? I don't think that people would necessarily say that. So if you don't think that that we should incentivize people to reproduce, then why would you have a problem with incentivizing people not to reproduce? I don't understand. So anyway, that's my view. But in Singapore and other places, they've done things like, I think women with a university degree are given some kind of incentive by the government to have children. And I don't know also why people would have a problem with that. If somebody has a university degree, that means that at least that they're, higher than average in conscientiousness. It still means that, and higher than average in IQ. And I don't know why you wouldn't say, if you're a woman with a university degree, we'll give you free childcare for a year if you have a baby. I don't know how many people that would push over the threshold of choosing to have a child, but it would seem to be a good thing if the government biased things in that direction. Because at least it would change the base rates of things like, unemployment.
That's interesting. I mean, you think about this a lot, and that's interesting. I don't think about this so much in a very intellectualized way, but I guess I would just add that from my perspective, I think that, my intuitions are that all life, that presents itself to us should be affirmed, basically. That's just my intuition. And yeah, I know you're like trying to contain your your contempt. But that's my intuition. And so like I don't think I would be personally very interested in like making any types of eugenic decisions personally.
So let's say that there's like okay.
I was only going to add that my little bit of beef here is that I think there's a lot of hypocrisy because there are people who will get really upset and do a lot of hand wringing around quote unquote eugenics, but they're like totally cool with abortion, and I find that very strange. So like I'm not very comfortable with abortion for the same reason I'm not very comfortable with eugenics, but I think that makes sense.
Even if you just made it like so that people who definitely didn't want to have children, that you made that effortless for them. The government was like, okay, fill out this form. Do you definitely not want to have children? Because on all else being equal, people who don't want to have children are going to take less good care of the children they have accidentally than people who do want to have children. I think even hardcore nurturing people who don't believe in genetic influence would believe that. And so if the government did that, that would be a form of environmental distinction. But anyway, let's
no, that's cool. I mean, everything you're saying makes sense at the level of public policy.
Yeah.
I just don't really think at the level of public policy. Like, I'm never really interested personally in thought experiments relating to like what should public policy do, because I'm not interested in pulling those kinds of levers personally.
Yeah. Okay. Somebody asked if I'm Catholic. I was actually raised Jewish and Catholic. I was baptized. I did First Communion. My mother's Catholic. My middle name is Santos. I'm half Portuguese. My mother is Maria Cristina. And I was raised sort of Catholic. Do
you think that smart women choosing career over family should be stigmatized?
No, I don't think it should be stigmatized.
To promote like babies among smarter women.
I just think there's just a lot of very mixed messages going on, because I think that kind of what's happening socially is that, like, I'm somebody who has prioritized career over family, and I'm not somebody who like has very much been interested in having children and things until very recently, because I think I'm interested in meeting the mother version of myself, and I'm interested in what kinds of children I would make. But I do think that there are women who think that they will be as fulfilled without children, and that's definitely a heavily promoted message. And I think that if we had a more realistic view about sex differences, we would tell women, actually, you might be very unsatisfied without children in your life, or you might be very unsatisfied. Casual sex might make you feel bad more so than men, or not having children might make you feel bad compared to men. And so I think that would be really useful. And we are causing unhappiness by saying, no, you will definitely be as fulfilled by career as you are by children. Mm-hmm. I've had a really amazingly intellectually stimulating career. If I was in some other career, I don't know, finance, or if I was doing administrative work or something, I don't think that would be a very helpful message to me. Mm-hmm.
Good answer. Very good answer. Thoughts on death penalty?
Oh, death penalty.
I think, I don't have very intellectual thoughts on male circumcision, just like I don't have very intellectualized thoughts on eugenics, but I can tell you my intuitions. Like, I definitely do think it's barbaric, but then again, I'm also kind of like, I don't really remember having my penis snipped, and I'm sure it was painful in the moment, but I don't really remember.
Yeah.
And I do kind of remember when I was younger, when I was a little boy, and you first start kind of like, sharing stories about your penis with other boys. The boys who were not circumcised they were seen as weird a little bit.
Yeah, because when you were growing up, it was like maybe 10% of boys were uncircumcised.
Now it's much more common?
Now it's like 50% in the U.S.
Oh, so it's really disappearing, circumcision?
So, yeah. If you look at like base rates of stuff, it seems like on average, circumcision and being circumcised and not being circumcised have similar rates of problems.
Oh, really?
Men report similar sexual satisfaction when they're circumcised and uncircumcised. There was one study done in Scandinavia that said that uncircumcised men's partners were happier with their sex. I have no idea if that's true. I think uncircumcised men probably have sensation that circumcised men don't, but they don't really know the difference, because most people are circumcised as infants and not after they have sex. I know somebody who was circumcised in his 30s, and he says that it's not that different. So I think that you have to... It wouldn't be a utilitarian reason. You'd have to say like autonomy and there's all these things that can go wrong. So I think that on average, the best thing is obviously not to intervene when there can be serious problems that would happen. Yeah.
Yeah, so you're saying the smartest default is no circumcision.
Yeah, the best default. And then if somebody has a problem where their foreskin is too tight or they have various other problems, there was some studies and there's been a big controversy about whether or not uncircumcised men are more likely to pass on HPV. There's some evidence from Africa that uncircumcised men are more likely to pass on HIV. But, Brian Earp, who you guys can look up on Twitter and stuff, he's written very, very compellingly that these studies haven't been well done and that not being circumcised is the best thing. So I would defer to his expertise. But I think that I'm going to get flagged for this, but I think people make too much of a fuss of it since most people who are circumcised have no problems.
You mean people make too much of a fuss either way?
Like, yeah, calling it like,
either way.
Male, what do they call that?
Genital mutilation.
Yeah, calling it mutilation.
You think that's too much?
If you're a woman who has your clitoris cut off, that's like cutting off the whole head of a man's penis. That's different. Having your clitoral hood cut off, which is actually not what generally female circumcision means.
That's a good point. That is a bit of a false equivalence.
Yeah,
actually. That's a good point.
But
yeah, I mean, I don't remember a thing about having my penis cut, so it couldn't have been that bad. I guess it could have been traumatizing in some way that I don't remember. What do you think? I think I'm pretty tired. We should just wrap it up.
Yeah, let's see if there's any
Unless
good
you want to see if there's anything
skin cream from baby foreskin.
Ew.
That's hilarious. Actually not hilarious. So there was like a huge thread about this the other day. Brian Earp said it was really fucked up, and I think it is kind of, but it is also darkly,
Yeah, I actually had the whole head of my penis cut off. Actual genital mutilation. Do we have any thoughts on EP as just so stories? EP? What are they?
Oh yeah, there's this thing about women actually are promoting female genital mutilation more than men are. I haven't read that. I'm agnostic about that. Don't you circumcise with mouth? No. That's really funny.
Don't positively reinforce the bad behaviors.
There's a thing that happens, but that's not it.
Is there any truth to this at all, that male circumcision was originally done to traumatize the infant early in life and desensitize them to pain and create a warrior cat whose desensitized penises made it easier to rape?
There's a thing about how circumcision was done by Puritans in the United States and like Kellogg and other people, because if you have a circumcised penis, then it's much harder to masturbate.
Oh, really?
Because you need lubricant to get your hand up and down your penis.
Yeah.
I've actually been to a bris, which is like where a rabbi circumcises a baby boy, and the hospital circumcisions done in the States tend to remove a lot more of the foreskin than like a Jewish circumcision does. There are Jewish men who are circumcised and you can't tell because they cut off such a small amount. And I'm going to get such flack for that. But I have been to a bris before, and the baby slept through the whole thing because it was anesthetized.
Oh, the baby slept through getting circumcised?
Yeah, because his penis was anesthetized. He was 3 days old, yeah.
Do they always anesthetize?
No, that's a new thing.
Oh.
Yeah.
That's fascinating.
I think it's bizarre. It's like a bizarre ritual.
It's a weird thing to do.
But if there's very, very low rates of complications.
I mean, the point I made before about the social stigma, like that's not as trivial as it sounds. Kind of like if you're in a culture where everyone is circumcised, being uncircumcised kind of sucks. Like especially if like women are gonna dislike it.
There's not any culture like that anymore. Like in most places now, at least 50% of men.
Sure, I'm just saying it was enough. It was popular enough when I was growing up
that it would be weird if you had been.
Like I felt grateful that I was circumcised.
Yeah,
is what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
When I learned like what that meant and that other people didn't have it. But I guess it'd be better for everyone to just not get it. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's enough. Unless somebody wants to, pay us to talk to us, I think that's enough.
Yeah, I know. I have the cheapest audience in the world. It's okay. I'm going to assume that this lovely live stream we've had produces like 5 new generous patrons.
Hope so. Give Justin your money.
No, the truth is they know that I'm not a shiller. Oh, sorry. They know that I don't shill, and they know that I don't really care.
0 super chats. That's right.
They know that I don't care. I do what I want for free, and I don't really care if they want to cough it up or not. But that's why they don't cough it up, because they know that I I'm gonna churn out that free content no matter what.
Yeah.
So is what it is.
To those of you complimenting my appearance, I appreciate that. I had nothing to do with it. Or these. Cool.
All right, let's wrap it up. Yeah.
Good night, you guys. It was
Good night,
really
everybody.
fun.
2 live streams. You're gonna stay if you're watching me on this one.
Yeah,
still,
on this one, you're gonna watch Justin sleep.
we're going for a long
If he
time.
wants to.
We're gonna do this endurance style. This one. Good night, everybody. Oh yeah, subscribe to my fucking channel, you dipshits, and all that stuff. See, I'm so bad at chilling. I don't even tell people all the
You
stuff I'm
suck at
supposed to.
chilling.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.